Welcome, everybody, to today's virtual event. Very exciting. We've got a tremendous panel. We're going to be talking about a new way of doing PDM, rethinking PDM for speed and security. Today, if you build products, you're under more pressure than ever to work quickly, more pressure than ever to collaborate and be innovative, and more pressure than ever to secure data, again, for a large number of reasons. We at Onshape Product Group at PTC, we believe we have a new approach to PDM. It doesn't rely on files, it doesn't rely on copies. So if you know Onshape, welcome. If you don't, forget everything you think about files and copies and checkout and locking, because we're going to show you better ways to work without any need for that. And it's going to be more secure and better for collaboration. We've got a great panel. Got a fantastic IP attorney. We've got a product developer, a famous consumer brand, and we've got an expert on cloud technology from AWS. I'll ask our panelists to introduce themselves. We'll start with you, Adam.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. My name is Adam Samansky. I'm a partner in the intellectual property litigation section here at Mintz Levin. We're a 550 lawyer firm in the United States with about 110 IP lawyers. And I've been litigating patent and trade secret cases for just about 20 years. Cases dealing with the theft of intellectual property, both defending companies accused of intellectual property theft and pursuing companies who have stolen intellectual property from our clients.
Thank you, Adam. And let's go to Jed.
Yeah, Jed Yeiser. I've been working in the ski industry for K2 Sports and sort of the associated brands for the last 15 years, originally as an engineer, moving through more sort of product development management, and now focused on more sort of emerging technologies, including, as it turned out, our switch to Onshape. So for those of you who are not familiar, K2 is sort of the largest North American ski brand. We started manufacturing on Vashon Island here in Washington. We're now manufacturing both in Asia and in Europe. And yeah.
Awesome. And Anubhav.
Yeah, thanks, John. So this is Anubhav Sharma. I'm a principal solutions architect here at AWS, Amazon Web Services. And in my role, I help customers build and architect secure and resilient applications. I have been very fortunate to work with the Onshape team recently in their journey to cloud, building a cloud native solution. So thanks, John, for having us here.
Thank you, Anubhav. And I'll introduce myself briefly. I'm Jon Hirshtick. I'm Chief Evangelist here at PTC. I've been building software for CAD and PDM for over 44 years. I've worked on a lot of products you've never heard of, but I've also worked on a couple you might have, which is I was the co-founder and longtime CEO of SolidWorks, where I spent almost 20 years, and co-founder and longtime CEO at Onshape. And Onshape was acquired by PTC 5.5 years ago, and it's just grown and developed. And I have this great job as chief evangelist, where my job is to listen to our customers, work with our technology partners, and try to help our team do better and better at everything we do. So with that, let's jump right in. Let's start. Jed, tell me, what were the biggest day-to-day challenges that you had with traditional file-based PDM?
It's a great question. I think really the biggest thing was ease of use. That we had some users that were quite adept with it, other users that weren't. Consistency is key when it comes to file management. Beyond ease of use, we had all of our CAD data stored on internally hosted servers along with our license server. And when the server goes down, as it did for us, just sort of needing server maintenance for about a 2-week period, about 18 months ago, we recovered from that and we were then hacked. And so there was a total of about 8 weeks where we were unable to interact with not only a lot of our CAD data, but a lot of our business data. And better ways of managing and storing that data and making that data accessible to those who need to use it has really been transformative for us. There's a lot of more nuances to that when it comes to, what PDM can do for understanding changes in a design and understanding sort of the evolution of a design over time. But we can get there, particularly as we get into the demo. But I think it's really ease of use and accessibility were the two biggest challenges for us.
Yeah, easy, great point. And I want to let our audience know that you're going to see some actual models from Jed and K2 later on in this live stream. So very exciting. I also want to extend a huge welcome to our audience worldwide. Lots of comments coming in. Tremendous questions have come in already. We have a long list of great questions. We're going to do our best at the end to get to as many of your questions as we can, but I'll encourage our audience members to post more questions during the webinar. Please go ahead and post your questions there and just say hi to all of you. And now let me go to Adam and ask you, Adam, and I think this live stream got started when Adam and I were talking one day, and he was telling me about cases he's had that actually involved theft of CAD files. Anyway, Adam, from a legal standpoint, what are the risks that companies expose themselves to if they poorly manage or don't secure their design data?
Well, thanks, John. And at a high level, there's a host of missed and lost opportunities with data that's not properly secured. Take, for example, a situation where you are an innovator in an industry and you have, whether it's a former employee, a vendor, contractor, hacker potentially, misappropriate your designs, either before they go to market or for a complex product that would be virtually impossible to reverse engineer, to take your years of research and development and use that for their own gain. That is lost market for you that you may never be able to recover. On the flip side, I've litigated many cases where I've represented clients who have innovated, but who have also been accused of stealing another company's intellectual property. By having good file systems, by having good data security, that information allows me to tell a story of independent development. And in many cases will allow me to tell a story of prior development to that of one accusing us of wrongdoing. Also, hacking, especially by foreign actors, is an omnipresent threat these days that faces locally hosted data, in particular. So that we can talk more about this as we get into some more specifics. But there really are a host of missed and lost opportunities when reasonable and really best practice measures aren't taken to secure valuable data. And these days, this is what I do for a living. Companies' intellectual property, that's where the value is.
Yeah, and Adam, I really loved in our discussions learning that it's not, obviously everyone understands the risk of losing their data, of it being stolen or hacked. That's something that comes up all the time. But the risk of getting accused of it yourself, and then and the opportunity to defend yourself through using the right systems and securing the right thing.
Well, John, I can give you a real quick example of that. I represented as a large, probably Fortune 500 consumer products company. And as isn't, normal in that space, they're approached by people for partnerships and to develop product all the time. They were approached by an individual who had an idea for a product. Their implementation wasn't that great. Our client said not interested. And about a year later, our client launched a very similar type product, although with a much better, more robust design. That individual then years later sued, saying that we misappropriated their idea. But because of good file management practices, we were able to go back and show through forensically sound computer-generated metadata that our client started development on this product independently about 6 months or a year before we'd ever been approached by this other person. Without those data, we wouldn't have been able to tell that story, and that would have been, again, a lost opportunity.
So these real world stories bring it to life, which is great. I wanted to, and Anubhav, let me ask you, I mean, how often are people turning to AWS because of information security? And while moving your file server to the cloud is some measure of security, is it true that really a full cloud native system like say Onshape gives security advantages?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the reality is that AWS have built around 200 plus services, which you can operate in a secure and governed fashion, right? So some of the capabilities like encryption at rest, encryption at transit is something that you don't have to like build anything from ground up. Like those are the features that you can just, pick and choose and make sure that they are part of your application. We have whole lot of services that can enable data governance, right? Like the principle of least permission, as an example. You can choose who have access to what data, and the fact that you have this whole observability in place, which can let you know that who is trying to access the data, right? So with all these features in place, customers like Onshape have been able to innovate really at the fast pace, right? And they take advantage of all these features that are available to customers like Onshape.
Yeah, and thank you. We feel like, our partnership with AWS has been great, and we're able to take, when we build a full cloud native system like Onshape, we're able to take maximum use of all the security that AWS has to offer. Jed, let me ask you, and I'm going to ask each of you, what are a few things that companies, whether you're a startup and you're just getting going, because this isn't just for large companies, right, panelists? We're not just talking about large companies.
No.
Could be you're a startup, one or two people, could be you're one of the largest companies, K2, obviously large, sophisticated organization. What are a few things companies can do to reduce risk around data from a legal standpoint, from an operational, technical perspective? And Jed, let's start with you. What has K2 done specifically?
Well, I mean, switching to Onshape, that's the easy answer.
We like hearing that.
But I mean, I'll let Adam cover the more legal side because he's in a far better position to do that than I am. But really, thinking about what information about your CAD data or any sort of design data, there's a lot of design data that lives outside of CAD. Who needs to access it? When do they need to access it? And what data about that data is it important to track? And I would say, when we were looking at switching to Onshape, we did so really for PDM. And I was looking at PDM as just a way to store CAD data. And with this sort of availability of a lot of the PDM solutions that are available in the tool, the way that information is presented and the way that you can go through the history of a model and understand all of the changes has really turned out to be fundamental to our ability to understand our own designs and make changes. So I think it's really thinking about, what's important outside of the actual data here, what metadata is important for us to be tracking and how can we use that. But whatever system you end up using, I mean, as I said before, it needs to be easy to use. If it's not easy to use, data doesn't end up into the system, then it's not protected from a legal standpoint, and it's really hard to track and trace. If you look at our file-based network storage, you'd often have files called like _final or V1, V2, Jed fix. And all of these things are done with the best intentions, right? People are trying to go into a design and solve a single issue without overwriting the single source of truth. But the result is that it just ends up being confusing for someone who wasn't making those changes. So when another engineer comes in, to understand the design and the design space takes a lot more time than it does when you have good PDM implemented. It's a long-winded answer. Yeah.
No, it's great, and we, of course, I love hearing switching to Onshape, which has lots of benefits in this area. Adam, what advice do you have for companies to reduce risk?
Well, first off, one of the requirements we frequently look at in the law is imposed by state trade secret law and the Federal Defend Trade Secrets Act, which is in order to claim something is a trade secret, a company needs to take reasonable measures to protect the secrecy of that information. That's a point Anubhav and Jed both hit on. One of the best practice ways to do that is, again, restrict information to need-to-know basis anyway. One of the great things about a cloud-native platform like you offer is that access rights can be restricted down to a microscopic level, which is very important. Now, back to the earlier question about what should small companies be doing. Small companies should be making themselves attractive to large companies. Why? Most small companies either want to be bought by a large company or want to get investment from a large company. What large companies then do, especially if a small company is trying to value themselves based on their IP, is they hire someone like me to do diligence. And some of the first things I ask are, who had access to this information? When did they have access to this information? And what did they do with it? The inability to provide that information raises questions in diligence. So traceability of information, the ability to audit who has had access, when, what has happened, why, and how are tremendously important to small companies trying to establish value to large companies. On the flip side, things we see all the time that are nightmarish are small companies with, locally hosted data. They have bring your own device policies where, a designer will have one computer with one hard disk with all sorts of information commingled on them. And not only is that a technical nightmare if that hard drive were to fry, but also from a legal perspective, it not only can be a nightmare as far as liability for exfiltration of really valuable information. It could also be a nightmare in the event of litigation, because in forensic harvesting, you're going to get everything that's on that computer, including information you would never want anyone ever to see.
All these are so, and then I'll ask Anubhav, what about you? What are things that you would advise companies to reduce risk?
I think in this case, data governance is very important, as Adam and Jed mentioned, right? I mean, the fact that you need policies in place to make sure that data is governed, who have access to the data. And I want to emphasize on the observability aspects, which is logging, tracing, and metering as well, right? So you basically log pretty much every call. You are able to trace who is accessing in what way, and like how many times have that been accessed, right? So all those three aspects should be taken into consideration to build an overall observability system. And then there's also a concept of like, for how long do you want the access, right? I mean, do you want to give an infinite time access? Is it some sort of short-term access, right? So these are the considerations that we see customers taking in this case and enforcing those policies, specifically in a file-based management system.
Yeah, and actually, I'll just add from my standpoint, when we designed Onshape, we said, hey, files, no matter what you do with your PDM vault, and you could certainly say, hey, we have a record of someone taking a copy of the file. Once they've taken the copy of the file, that's permanent. They have that file, right, Anubhav? There's nothing you can do with AWS or Adam, they have that copy of the file. You don't know what they're doing with it. There's no log associated with it. You don't know where it goes. Well, with Onshape, there are no copies of files. So we built Onshape so there's your data always stays in the database, encrypted at rest and in transit, always. Unlike files, which once they're out, they're not encrypted. They're on your local drive. And we eliminate by design so many of the security risks, and we add all this logging and access control that you would never get in the standard CAD or PDM environment. But back to our panelists, let's go back to Jed and K2. Now, once you move to Onshape, tell us a little more about what changed, not only with security, but with collaboration. And I understand maybe you can show us a couple of models.
Yeah.
This would be really exciting.
Absolutely. And I mean, to your point, John, and I know that Adam had mentioned this before, really the benefits that we saw outside of just having our data managed was understanding the development story of our products a lot better and understanding how things have changed over time. So what we're seeing here is this is what we would consider a PU or an injected tool. So this is a ski design. This is a Blur 76. Right now you're just seeing the tooling, but I can open up this versions and history menu, and those of you who are familiar with Onshape may have your eyes glaze over a little bit. So we've got a ton of different versions in here with a number of different contributors. The ski ends up being a pretty simple ski. The tooling and the part design, it really isn't, and requires, at least for this sort of a ski, requires quite a bit of collaboration between design and manufacturing. And so I can go back through and I can see who made any one change at any one time. The versions are labeled, and so I can sort of scroll through this design tree or this version tree and get a 20,000 foot view of how the design has evolved over time. And just being able to do that is unbelievably powerful for someone who, like, if I send this to a colleague of mine in Germany who wasn't involved in the design, they now have, I would say, a trail of breadcrumbs, but it's a trail of bread, really, to understand how this model was made. You can then look at sort of comments where I'm talking with one of our manufacturing engineers, talking about how things need to change. So within
Jed,
the model,
if you don't mind, if I could jump in just for one second.
Yeah.
What you were showing on the prior screen on the left-hand side with that storyline and timeline, in cases I've litigated predating Onshape, we've spent tens of thousands of dollars in time to create timelines to be able to tell that story of product development, which is so important when you're going to court and trying to tell the story of innovation to a jury. You have that automatically generated right there, which I just find fascinating and incredible.
Well, and it's one of these things that, like, you know, having never used, we were using SolidWorks before, and I sort of saw I've used Get and thought, like, oh, you know, versioning and branching and merging CAD data would be really helpful. I was very unprepared for how helpful it is to really understand, you know, why are we doing things? Or sometimes you'll see a branch where someone's like, hey, I just wanted to try a thing. I wanted to do something different. I don't want to interfere with the source of truth. I just want to try a thing. And they can do that. And I can go and say, oh, well, Sean's looking at changing the sidewall profile, and I like the way he's doing that. Another huge advantage of this sort of approach is oftentimes, particularly down here, you know, in the model tree, you'll see this is September, October of last year. We maybe tried to do one thing with the design and abandoned it for very good reasons. And then you get to a point later in the design where either some limitations have changed, our needs have changed. You can then go back to what you did and abandoned and just reintegrate that right into your final model. So as far as being able to sort of reuse good unused ideas, it's enormously powerful.
And can I just want to jump in too before this image goes away. I want to highlight some key differences, and I hope you'll agree. Is some people may say, well, in my PDM system, I can keep versions of a file, and you can. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
But here you're getting so much more, you know, you're getting 1,000 times as much information, because you don't just have the versions of a file, you have every single edit that has ever been made, timestamped and identified by who made it. You don't have that in any other PDM. And then you also have the ability to do this branching and merging that Jed referred to Git, which was a major inspiration for. I just want to highlight for our listeners that Git and GitHub are tools used by software engineers who are very familiar with these branch and merge workflows, but you're not going to find that in traditional PDM. So those are two differences right away. Third difference is in traditional PDM, you lock things. We all know that. You have to say, hey, I'm checking it out, I'm copying it to my local computer. Security risk, by the way, as Adam said, goes on your hard drive. Who knows where it goes after that? And all the good work that Anubhav and AWS does, that ends when that file comes out. But with Onshape, it stays. And so you're able to work in parallel with no locking, no checkout, no copying. And I also want to just say, when what you're seeing here, many of you have seen CAD and PDM before, but you've never seen it. If you don't use Onshape, you never see it like this, because there's nothing installed on Jed's computer. There's no files he copied. It's a web browser, and people told us it would be impossible to build. But our friends at AWS worked with us and our brilliant team here, and we've done it. Like, when we started Onshape, people said, oh, this will never work. It's too hard. And we've done it and it works. And so I'm just excited to see all that. Sorry, I don't want to interrupt too much. I just want to share some pride here and watching it come alive and in a real example, which is so rare that we get to see, other than a demo. So please keep going, Jed.
Yeah, I mean, thanks, John. I would say, another thing that has been really beneficial for us is you'll see, there are some versions here that are just going up by an integer, right? Version 86, version 84, but you can also name versions, right? And so this really helps understand what was going on. Like here, releasing the updated BSS is the construction tool. So releasing updating tooling, releasing separate BSS lid shims. So with each one of these versions, I can very quickly just look and say, like, okay, I want to understand the tooling or the width of the tooths on the inserts better. This is where those things were happening. This is where it was added to the model. I can see who did all of these things. I now have no issues understanding and really approving changes to this model. Along those lines, you'll see some of these icons have little triangles and triangles with a dot. What that tells you is that there were parts that were released in this version. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Onshape, every document, every part has versions. When you're releasing a part gets a part number, it gets a lot of metadata attached to it. It then gets revision tracked, and it's not getting revision tracked until you actually release it. And basically, in releasing a part, you're telling your manufacturing partners, your design engineers, hey, we believe this is ready to go. We believe that this is the final version of this base sheet insert or this bottom tool. And those of you on the call who are familiar with this process know that it's not often that you release something once. You often need, that's just the way things, there are corner cases that you just can't envision when you're designing something that become real hurdles that you need to get over when you're trying to get things manufactured. And so versioning, releasing helps you do that. You can actually go in, and here I've got two different versions that I'm comparing. So I'm comparing my main branch to, I just chose a branch at random. But you can select those two versions. You see data down here saying, hey, it looks like something changed. So I can go in and I can compare two versions, document by document, part studio by part studio, assembly by assembly, feature by feature. And I can drill down as deeply as I want into how things have changed. And when you're dealing with complicated design data, far more design than more complicated than what I'm showing you here, that understanding and the ease at which anybody can establish that level of understanding for themselves because of the way the data is managed is unbelievably helpful for us. And I would argue any company designing products, because you won't touch a design for a year. Like there are designs that we won't touch for 2 or 3 years, and then there's a problem and we need to go back and we need to reestablish that deep level of understanding quickly. 100%. And this helps us do that.
Other than going back, like you just described, is this ability to see so much and beyond the security side, which we've talked a lot about, are you getting are you getting designs done faster, or would you say are you getting them done in the same time but maybe better because you've had more collaboration, or or neither or both?
It's much faster, and I think the at least when it comes to modifying design data for us, our largest challenge historically has been sort of building a level of understanding with our manufacturing partners. So where we manufacture, it's internal. They're factories we own and operate, so we're not as concerned about sort of protecting. Our manufacturing engineers can see our full design trees. We have no issues with that.
Okay.
But through language barriers, through any number of different issues, it can often be really difficult to get a really thorough understanding of exactly what the problem is and what needs to change. And that's really where a lot of these commenting features saying like, hey, this part in this feature needs to change. We need to change this surface, has allowed us to, I'd say a typical problem used to take us a week to resolve, and we're now on the order of a day.
And that's
more DFM. Yeah.
That's a big deal. So again, I'll ask you. So thank you, by the way. We love hearing that, and we hear that a lot. So you reduced your week to a day on a DFM resolution, which is fantastic. I know Anubhav shares some of our pride here. Ultimately, Jed is the most important guy on the panel because Adam, me, Anubhav, we all ultimately all work so that Jed can do something good, and I want to get to that goodness. So you save time in the DSM issue. Does that mean that you're getting the ski into the consumer's hand faster, or does it mean you're saving some money, or does it mean the product was better, that when we buy the ski, we're getting a better product because of this?
I mean, I'd say it's really the latter two.
Okay.
It's the time to market. Just we need snow to test, and so our testing schedule is really dictated by weather, and you can't get around that. And it's really, if you're more efficient with your design and your prototyping, you can then pursue more ambitious ideas, and hopefully that results in a better end product. And so I think the time we save results in a better product more than it getting into consumers' hands more quickly. And sort of beyond DFM, the huge advantage to being able to branch and merge is if there is a specific manufacturing problem, I can create a branch targeted at solving that problem. That's where myself and the manufacturing engineer are going to work. Our main branch saying, hey, here's our one source of truth for this is our current version of what we're making, remains unaltered. And we can go and we can modify all of the data if we want in a different branch without impacting the one source of truth, and then bring whatever components of that back into the main design once we've resolved the issue. And so if you're modifying designs to, whether it's make performance changes or manufacturing changes, you can kind of do that in parallel without creating any ambiguity as to what the single source of truth is.
So the future skis that we can go out and buy, they might be a better product because of all this.
I would argue there's no question in my mind. Yeah.
I mean, that to me is just so satisfying to know. And that's actually a great point, because sometimes, I mean, I'm not being facetious here, because some people might say, oh, the benefit of all this is we got the same product out faster, or we saved money, because, time is money. And so, but to hear you built a better product, that's ultimately, what I think people want to do, and very competitive. Can I ask you, did you, maybe you could show us something about BOM and bill of material handling too?
Yeah, absolutely. This is, this model that I'm showing you is a great example of how not to, it was a great learning experience for me. I got way too ambitious with it being just overly configured. And ended up making the regen time on this is just absurd. So I've got different tabs open. It is loading the BOM here. For those of you who are less familiar with Onshape assemblies, here I've got a list of all my sort of sub-assemblies and parts, as well as mates that come in. We then have our bill of materials, so I just click a BOM.
Excuse me. When you said regen time is absurd, does that mean absurdly fast or absurdly slow?
No, I mean we can get into all of the silly decisions I made while trying to be clever, and then got deep enough into this design where it was kind of basically a lot of very complicated surfacing and cleaning up surfacing, and then making the design deeply configured so that this will work across 6 sizes with different inputs. And
So
you know, it works, it rebuilds, but I would do it right. Yeah. But so for each part, you know, I have the part number here. I have the revision of each part. Because this is important for us, I know the part mass. And then here you can see which material I'm using. I can add quite a bit of, or a number of fields to this BOM, right? So I just come in and I say, add a column. I want to look at the state or appearance. And so it will give me information about all of the parts in this bill of materials that we're making for this product. And so I can very quickly get an understanding of not only what's going into this, but where is each subcomponent at in its design process.
And just compare that. I mean, we've seen bill of materials in CAD since the world of 2D CAD. We had them on paper. What's the difference here? Not that I don't know, but I'm curious to hear. What's the difference relative to, say, your old approach with your old CAD system, your old PDM system?
I don't think we were using our SolidWorks as well as we could have. So I do need to sort of put a caveat.
Well, it gets that ease of use again, because if you can't learn it, who cares what it does?
Our bill of materials is tied directly to our design data with this formulation, whereas before we would sort of maintain our design data separately and then have in a PLM system a number of items that we were associating files with, and then is the correct version of the file the one that is on our PLM system or the one that's on our internal network, and what happens when things change. So basically I don't need to manage BOMs. BOMs are managed by my CAD data. And that's a huge time savings as well.
That's what we like to hear. And I'm hoping, Adam, would you say that's a better approach for securing data, to have it all in one model instead of separating?
Well, absolutely. There are two observations I have from the demo we all just watched. Number one is I think it's actually going to be expensive, because there's probably going to be a new set of skis in my future. And if there's a new set of skis in my future, that means my kids are going to need them too. So Jed, thank you.
Happy to help. Happy to help there.
Yeah.
But the other thing too that you see, and I've seen this across disciplines with inventors and innovators, these are the people I deal with every day. The day-to-day process of design and development is often just evolutionary. There are very small changes made step after step. The problem comes up, that gets solved. Every once in a while, one of those evolutionary steps that you think in the moment is really just an evolution from A to B is a revolution in technology. You don't know that yet. I can tell you, and this comes from experience, trying cases on billion-dollar products in front of juries. If the inventors realized at the time that the step they'd taken, the small leap they'd taken in technology was a revolution in technology, they would have preserved all of the data that we were just looking at, so that 10, 15 years later, I'd be able to tell that story. But in your mind, when you're working on this, you don't know you've just revolutionized something. What we just saw is the ability to go back years after the fact and be able to tell that story of innovation and revolution in technology without knowing that you had revolutionized technology at that time. The other thing we saw, I think that's critical, and Jed, you hit on this point too, we call them in the trade negative trade secrets. You try a whole bunch of stuff that just doesn't work. For a competitor to know everything you've tried and didn't work, that's huge. That can save,
You learn
virtually
way more from
infinite
failure than
hours,
success.
time and money. Or a branch that sort of, it didn't go anywhere for this technology, but maybe it'll go somewhere for a different application. These concepts are huge, and to be able to trace and audit these data from the legal perspective, both in protecting IP, if we're looking at the patent side of the house and drafting a patent specification, trying to tell that and write out that history of innovation, or on the trade secret side, we're trying to lock this information down, but still keep a record of it. So we have that story, we have that documentation. This is tremendous. The other thing I would add is it adds a significant degree of deterrence, so that if a potential malicious actor, a contractor, employee who might be leaving, is thinking of taking something with them or looking at something they're not supposed to be looking at for the wrong reason, they know there's going to be an audit trail of that. And we're going to have that audit trail forever. And that can also be a very powerful deterrent, so that even though this will give you the tools to be able to pursue and potentially prosecute that theft after the fact, it also, I think, would have a strong deterrent effect to prevent any of that exfiltration of secret technical information in the first place.
The one thing that I would add to
point.
that, Adam, or not add to it so much as just sort of mention, is that everything you mentioned is unbelievably important. With the way that I'm using Onshape, it doesn't require anything extra for me to provide that, right? Like I don't finish a design or a thought and think like, okay, great, well now I need to manage the data so this is traceable. There's no additional overhead for me to create that story and to create that traceability. It's just integrated into the workflow. And
you don't have to think, is what I did now important, routine,
it's
unimportant?
there, right?
It's there,
right.
Because you may not know that until well after the fact.
Yeah, and
As
I
I
think
mentioned, like,
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, go on.
I mean, it's ease of use is the most important thing, and I don't think about using this until I need to.
Yeah. It's a great point. When we set out to build it, we said, hey, usually organizations are trying to decide between either draconian measures around security or crossing your fingers. It's like, well, we'll let everyone work fast, but we don't have time to keep proper records, or we'll lock everything down and go drive people crazy. And with Onshape, we set out to break that dichotomy and say, hey, you can have it all. You can work super fast, be super creative, super iterative, and have everything under better control, better audit trail. And that's what we love hearing. By the way, this fantastic discussion. I do want to go to questions because we have an incredible number of questions that I really want to try to get to as many as we can, because I think they're going to trigger a lot of great discussion. I'm going to start with, I'll say here, we have a great honor to have a longtime friend of mine here, Mark Halpern of Gartner Group here. Mark, fantastic to have you join us. And you ask here, is Onshape PDM? It is impressive, thank you. Is it inextricably linked to Onshape? I'll say pretty much it is, Mark. I mean, pretty much Onshape, CAD, and PDM. I mean, really Onshape at its core is a PDM engine, CAD and other applications built on top of it. Think about that, very different from other systems. And the benefits you're seeing here, you really have to use Onshape as your CAD. Could you put some other CAD files in, a few here and there, and kind of manage them? You could to a degree, but we're not really meant to be used in that way. I want to say here, there's I'm going to go back to another question here. Is there an add-on method for SAP to control the rev of record, yet have Onshape not get out too far ahead of their skis, so to speak? And the answer is, Yes, you can integrate with PLM systems like SAP using our APIs. That can be installed SAP. It can be a cloud-hosted SAP that I know Anubhav and AWS could help you with. Together, you can link it. You can have SAP be the part number master, for example. You can have releases controlled through. We also have a wonderful integration with PTC's Arena PLM product out of the box, and then you can use Arena as your release master. I see a question here. Let me go to one for my panelists here. Well, a lot of these are just straight Onshape questions, so I will try to answer these. Is Onshape able to deal with linking PDF documents to a particular design release? Absolutely, yes. You can put them on a tab in an Onshape document and release them. Jed, I don't know if you're doing that today, but you certainly can do that. You can put regular files into Onshape documents. You can also export them from Onshape. And when using feature script, we often rely on attributes to embed semantic information. And you're going to share the data model with customers. How can we prevent external companies from accessing or reading sensitive data? We have a lot of strategies. Thank you, Pierre. If you talk to one of your Onshape, I don't know if you have a technical services or customer success member of our team, they can help you with this technique. You could also ask our Onshape AI advisor for advice on these topics. It's in our learning center right now. Thank you, AWS, for your partnership and enabling us to offer AI at scale to all our users today. And you can ask it questions like this, but one strategy I would think of is you could create derived parts from your master parts and use, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, you can look this up in Onshape documentation, and that can be a way to segregate out some of the information you don't want people seeing. You could also use our Onshape publications to give a user a subset view of your data. And I won't elaborate too much on that because I want to touch on a lot of questions here. I think my colleague Sandeep answered in there about LDAP and SAML, SSO. Absolutely, we work with those. Our enterprise edition of Onshape works with single sign-on. And again, thank you, AWS, for your help with that. Sorry, I don't mean to monopolize these, but these are Onshape questions. These are what they're asking. So
there are a lot of really good ones. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm trying to do quick ones. Do we have a way to differentiate the mold history versus a final part from that mold after 3% shrinkage? And I think if you're asking, could you have like as molded and a shrink, or unshrunk and shrink? You could do that through again, number of strategies. I would use configurations. Jed, I don't know what you think about that.
Thankfully, I don't need to deal with calculating shrinkage for our injected parts. I will generally design the part that I want and send that off to one of our vendors, who will, share the final CAD data with us. But configurations would be one way to do it. There are number of different ways to do.
Yeah, but I want to be clear. We don't automate the calculation of that shrunk part. You'd have to use geometric modeling tools or other strategies in Onshape to do that, but we can certainly deal with the configurations and the comparison. We can do fantastically. Here someone asked, we have 50 standard forms for each job. Are the forms all available for every job we create automatically? Is there a task bucket for each form? So it sends to the correct person after they finish their task. It goes to the next person, engineering changes. So I'm going to read between the lines here. We don't have an explicit form capability in Onshape. But we do have a fantastic way to have custom workflows, again, only in our enterprise edition of Onshape. So those of you who are using Onshape Standard, Onshape Pro, you're not going to be familiar with this. It's only in our Enterprise Edition. We have custom workflows, and these can get very sophisticated. You can define them, very elaborate workflows that could automatically send to the correct person, trigger the next event. You can also use our API to automate that. So I can't say for certain the resolution of the question here from what I can read, but I would say it would look very promising. And then I'm going to go over to our other list of questions here. Just give me a moment. I have the other some more questions here. Okay, I'm going to go to. I'm really looking. Okay. Okay, we had a question. Can you share specific practical use cases as to how Onshape's PDM is an improvement over traditional? I hope you saw that in Jed's demo and Adam's discussion after the demo. I'm going to hope there. Can you review history was another question. I think Jed knocked the cover off that ball with his demo. Thank you, Jed. How does PTC ensure cybersecurity requirements? Let's start with Anubhav. Can I ask you, I think security, I'm going to set the stage here and say, you've got to compare no security is absolutely good or absolutely bad. Compare security. So let's take a customer who's got their own PDM system and files on all their own Windows computers that they're trying to upgrade with their in-house IT. Anubhav, how does the security at AWS compare to what you're likely to see at a small manufacturer?
Well, I mean, as I mentioned, John, like AWS offers a set of services that you can, use out of the box to secure your application. We have firewall management protection. We have versioning enabled observability. All those features come out of the box. But I think what is more important here is the fact that the Onshape team has leveraged all of that and built a secure system on top of it. I think that's the key here, right? I mean, you otherwise will have to take all these building blocks and build a system which will be secure, and then you have to go through a lot of auditing to get it certified and make sure, and testing. That's the big part of it, right? As well, right? You can't really guarantee anything is working unless you test it and certify. And the way our customers are like innovating in their SaaS solutions are taking all this services and building secure solutions on top of it. So I think looking at the demo, I really can see how transformative a secure SaaS solution you have built, John.
Yeah. So, and I think, great answer. I'm happy to know we do. The short answer is that we take security measures far beyond what the average manufacturer might be able to take. Okay. So no offense to you, our customers, but if you're trying to self-secure with your Windows computers, your IT teams, your files copied everywhere. Adam's laughing because, I see USB keys being used at customers. I mean, those are the security risks you should worry about. So we secure in two ways. How does PTC Onshape secure? One is by design. We eliminate so many security problems. Two is by taking measures by using AWS services and an extensive security team here that we meet certifications like SOC 2. If you know what that is, if you don't, ask your corporate security team. If they don't know, get a better corporate security team. Super important. And then the other thing I'm going to mention to kind of give you a shorthand endorsement of this is we recently launched Onshape Government, again, working closely with AWS and their Gov Cloud, which meets stringent government security, even for military projects. We now have a version of Onshape called Onshape Government, meets ITAR, EAR, and we're hoping to expand those compliance levels as well. But ITAR hits a lot of it. So that's out of the box, ITAR, fantastic solution for those of you who need it. For those who don't, you should think about what that means for your security. So security, a big win for Onshape and Cloud Native compared to what you're doing today. And unfortunately,
John, just to
Jed learned it.
Explain my laughter. There's a common misconception among people. I imagine the folks on this call are of a higher level of sophistication, but I mean, the fact is plain. If your storage media is plugged into the internet or ever gets plugged into the internet, it can be hacked. It's really just that simple. So somebody thinking, well, locally hosting something on my server is safer than having it in a cloud platform like we just heard described with about security measures. That's just a falsity.
Yeah, and I also see a question about availability. In sort of same answer on availability. Our availability that we get when you use Onshape at AWS, you get a level of availability that you cannot match with any install your own system at your company. So I appreciate the question. What happens if the internet goes out? What happens if electricity goes out? Those are certainly great questions. Look at our track record. We have a status page, status.onshape.com. It shows you all the outages we've ever had, and you can look them for yourself. There's two kinds of outages. There's unscheduled downtime when something unexpected happens. And then there's scheduled downtime where you have to take your system down for upgrades and things. I want you to know, most customers know what scheduled downtime is when they upgrade and so forth. Onshape has had zero scheduled downtime. We've never had to schedule and say to our customers, hey, this weekend's not available. Anubhav, do you guys have scheduled downtime for AWS? Do you say, oh, this weekend AWS is unavailable? You'd never do that. You can't do that, right?
I mean, that's the whole point of a SaaS solution, right? I mean, you handle the releases behind the scene, without even customers knowing that you're releasing something, right? I mean, that's a beauty of SaaS product.
And you could end up in a situation where the internet goes out, but you're much more likely to end up in a situation where your Windows computer won't boot, your PDM server's down. Jed opened with his own stories. I don't have to tell you, that's very typical. So security, big win for cloud native Onshape AWS versus your own. Availability, big win for cloud native versus your own systems. How relevant is remote online work using Onshape, and is it a growing trend? I think it's very relevant. Yes, it's a growing trend, and Onshape's a big win. I'm going to ask my panelists here, how relevant is remote online work and using Onshape? Is it a growing trend?
I'm at home right now. I do a ton of my CAD work from home. I've used Onshape at 40,000 feet on a plane. So yeah, I mean, and to get back to some of the things I was showing earlier, some of the primary advantages of using Onshape for at-home work or sort of disparate work organizations is that you can comment and tag and basically ask questions and be involved all with the same model. You can collaborate in real time. And so it's not 6 different people working on 6 different files on their, personal machines at home, which then need to get reassembled into something. We're all able to use the same data simultaneously, and that's unbelievably powerful for work at home.
Yeah, I would just add that delivering a solution in a web-based SaaS model is a pretty standard and pretty well proven mechanism these days that we see our customers doing, right? So and we see the end customer benefiting from that model a lot. So just wanted to add that.
So we have a couple. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, look, the fact is, remote work is a way of life today. And rewinding back to the COVID time, I was giving seminars to clients on how do you protect your confidential technical information in this new remote environment. And the answer is generally cloud native, because in that sort of platform, right, it doesn't matter where someone's working. If someone's working at a terminal in their office per se, or they're working at 40,000 feet or at home, they have the same level of access and same level of security. Versus back in the old days, where fortunately I don't have one on my desk anymore, you would save stuff to a stick drive, you take that home, plug that into your home computer, and who knows where that data went.
Who knows where it goes, yeah. Well, I got to say, we didn't have time to answer all the questions. Unfortunately, I did as many as I could. I want to say a huge thank you to our panelists today. Adam, Jed, Anubhav, you all have a lot to do every day. We really appreciate you coming out today and sharing your time, your thinking. Jed, huge thanks for those demos that you showed.
It's an honor to be here. So yeah, thank you.
So thank you so much. On behalf of everyone, we had a fantastic audience, great registration, fantastic questions. Those that we didn't answer, some of them asking about how to get help with specific issues, reach out to us at Onshape. We have a team. Go to our, contact us off our website. We have an outstanding team here of customer success and tech services people, because it's never just the software. You're always going to need our help, and we're here to provide that. So thank you all, and hope you learned something useful about both securing your data and collaborating and being more innovative around your data. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks for having us back.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.